Hello, everyone. I am really excited and honored to be a part of this webinar, this awesome event that we're doing today. My name is Lana Seiler. I am the Associate Director of Clinical Operations at All Points North Lodge. APN Lodge is a behavioral health company specializing in addiction treatment, mental health, trauma therapy. We have the privilege of walking with our clients as they find their next steps and move beyond things that are holding them back. The lodge is located in Edwards, Colorado, where our clients come to our beautiful campus to do the in-person treatment that we offer. We also have telehealth outpatient program, which really gives us the opportunity to offer more services. So we can cover a really broad spectrum of care. So our APN community actually covers the whole country, which is pretty exciting. So I want to give a special welcome to alumni, clients, family members, and therapists who are joining this webinar today. In celebration of Pride Month, today's APN speaker series will spotlight American entertainer and reality television personality, Gigi Goode. You may know her from RuPaul's Drag Race, but today Gigi will sit down with us as her authentic self to have a candid conversation on the topic of LGBTQ plus mental health. A special welcome to Gigi's friends and fans as well. So I really like to start these webinars with a little connection exercise because it's virtual and we are really spread out all over. So those of you who want to join me in this little connection exercise, you're welcome to. We're going to start with just some breath work and taking a moment to kind of get centered and grounded and connect energetically with all of our friends and family all over the country. So if you're open to it, take a moment to allow your eyes to close. And I'd like to do a heart connection exercise today. So if you're open to bringing your hand to your heart, and we're just going to take a few moments to feel our heartbeat. Just noticing the rhythm of your heart. As well as the rhythm of your breath. And we don't need to make any changes to the breath, just notice the inhales and the exhales. And feeling your heartbeat as you take a moment to kind of hone in and connect to that rhythm of life that lives in us and beats within us every moment of our life. We can connect to everybody else, wherever they are in their physical location, joining us in this webinar, in this event. Everyone else connecting to their heartbeat as well. So in this way, we can join each other energetically and with intention. And then nice and slow, you can open your eyes and remove your hand from your heart, but keep that connection feeling with the rest of us. So now that we've taken some time to be present and connect, let me set the scene a bit. According to the recent national survey on LGBTQ youth mental health report, which was done by the Trevor Project, 40% of young LGBTQ plus individuals have considered suicide in the last year. That number rises to more than 50% for those who identify as trans and non-binary in this category. As we begin this conversation, APN Lodge really hopes to raise the awareness and promote acceptance for the critical issue of mental health in the LGBTQ plus community, as well as provide insight on how we as a society can be better allies to our peers and family in these communities. We're joined today by APN Lodge's own Dr. Kate Daly, who is a psychiatrist. She's also our medical director here at All Points North Lodge. She works on campus. Dr. Daly is a member of WPATH, the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, and has specialized training in working with the transgender community and transgender health. We're also joined by John Hardman, who's a therapist here at APN Lodge too. Gigi will not only share her personal experiences, but also discuss the stigma around the treatment of mental health in the LGBTQ community. We encourage our viewers to join the conversation and submit questions for Gigi in the Zoom Q&A chat function or through Twitter using the APN hashtag APN Speaker Series. Now, please join me in welcoming Gigi Goode, Dr. Kate Daly, and John Hardman to the APN Speaker Series. Welcome, guys.
Hi, how's it going, everyone?
Hi, I'm doing well. How are you?
Fabulous.
Thank
Good to see you, Kate. Good to see you, John.
Hi, good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you so much, Gigi, for taking the time today for our live speaker series. We're so excited to connect and talk to you a bit more.
Yeah, of course. I think this is very important, and I feel honored to be able to have this opportunity to get to talk with all of you.
Thank you. Well, I thought it'd be good to just get started and talk with you a little bit about your own story. You're a high-profile entertainer and with a very public persona, but you also have your own individual persona outside of that public persona that's put forward.
Yeah.
And we would just love to hear your story, kind of how you came to be Gigi Goode, and a little bit about your coming out story and that journey, if you're comfortable with that.
Yeah, of course. Oh, girl, we're about to unload it all.
I'm just getting right to it.
So we might as well.
Jump right in there.
Yes, of course. I mean, my whole life, I think that mental health has been a part of my whole upbringing, whether I knew about it or not. I think it's always been something that my parents were consciously aware of, and were pretty active about in making sure that my brothers and I had the proper mental care, whether that was with learning or with gender, as we'll get to, with what have you. But I was born in Evanston, Illinois, which is near Chicago, and I'm the youngest of three boys. Well, boys. But I say that with quotes because I'm very much on some spectrum that I don't believe really exists. And that has been at the forefront of my life since I was just a teeny little tot. And I think that is ultimately where a lot of these sort of young mental health discussions kind of came about. But when I was little, I was that little kid who definitely was completely unapologetic about who I was and what I wanted to wear, and what I wanted to play with, who I wanted to play with. I don't remember having any friends who were boys. I had only like girlfriends, and those were kind of my opportunities to play with dolls and to play with hair and to wear the ruby red slippers every once in a while and play dress up and all of that kind of stuff. And of course, as a kid, I had never thought that any of that was taboo or strange, or maybe our neighbors were going to turn their heads as they were mowing their lawn and this little fairy was out playing in the yard wearing a cape and a tutu, or but that's because my mom really never hindered me from being that kid, and never hindered me or told me that it was strange or that people might look at us weird, which I know is not the average story for a young queer kid and their parents. But you know, my mom, just the other day, we were talking about this call that we're having right now, and just talking about mental health and the history of that within our family. And she told me some things that I was not necessarily aware of, that definitely make a lot of sense. Which one of that being my grandmother, her mother has been a family counselor for years, you know, up until I think after I was born. So I think that mental health had always been an important thing for my mother and her side of the family. I really just was able to live my life, thankfully, and I count my blessings every single day. And because of that, I sort of started to experiment with makeup and hair and costume. And you know, my mom is a seamstress. She's had clothing patterns around and fabrics and buttons and trims, like all throughout my life. There's just been glamour in some form,
like costume and
yes, yeah. In some form. There's maybe not necessarily there's been glamour, but there have been the materials that I needed to make the glamour. So again, it was never hindered from me. But you know, I know when I was little, like tiny child little, my parents took me to see a gender specialist, a gender therapist, because I guess after a while, I think I leaned way more into the feminine than the masculine. And like I said, I've always kind of teetered that line, but I think for a little minute, there was some time where I think my parents were genuinely questioning whether or not I may have some gender issues or whether I was trans or anything like that. And they didn't necessarily have the language to know exactly what that was. They didn't know anybody who was trans. They didn't know anybody who was, you know, that very flamboyant. But this, keep in mind, was probably 2001. I would have been 4 or something. And they took me to this gender specialist who diagnosed me with gender identity disorder.
At 4.
And literally, which is crazy. It's crazy. And it's, I mean, I can understand, you know, from my parents' point of view, maybe being just curious and just wanting answers. I don't necessarily know that they were looking for a diagnosis. And obviously terms have changed since then. I don't believe it's called gender identity disorder anymore. But I think that kind of sparked some more interest / concern for my parents. I think at that point was when there was really a label put on me. That was really the first time anyone had ever put a label on me. And I think that scared my dad a lot. He is a very religious man. He's worked at a Christian university for as long as I've known him, which is my entire life. And you know, for years upon my, you know, coming out, or I guess being outed, which is a whole other story, he kind of hung that over my head for a long time and really made me understand that, you know, if anyone from this job finds out or blah blah blah, you know, you can connect the dots there. But you know, so cut to, sorry, this is long story long, we're getting there. Cut to my like real self-discovery, which ultimately came from makeup and hair and costume and theater, honestly. So I guess, for lack of a better term, drag. And I started drag when I was just 14 or 15 years old, and I didn't tell my parents, I didn't tell my brothers. I did it on my own with some other 15-year-old drag queens that I went to school with. And it really like opened my eyes to all things. Like it really connected the dots for me in terms of, you know, at the time I was like, here's your answer to my parents. It's not a gender thing, it's not a trans thing, it's just drag. And obviously these things have changed over the years as I've had a lot more self-discovery.
So when
But
you feel pressure to have to like put a label, something on it, define it, label it,
no,
in some way?
I have never in my life felt any sort of pressure to put any label on myself, except for from, I guess, from the outside perspective. I've always been very self-aware. I've always been very aware of other people. And I've always been one that's just wanted to make everyone in the room as comfortable as possible. So there have been times where there have been people in the room that I know I couldn't just say, I don't identify as anything, because these people may have been raised some type of way. There may be a generation gap. They might not understand. So I think sometimes, especially in like family settings and those situations, I kind of have to dumb it down a little bit and fit into some category, which is literally always changing for me. But yeah, I've never personally felt pressure to fit onto any sort of gender spectrum.
In terms of finding drag, though, and you're, talking about that as a part of the journey, and then being able to say to your parents, we'll see, I found drag, so now that's what it's been all along. Is that kind of part of the sense at the time that you had?
At the time, yes, and it was mostly just a way to get them to shut up a little bit. Like it was like, because both of my parents had two very different opinions on drag when I started doing it. Neither of them had any idea who RuPaul was. They didn't know what drag was actually. My mom for a split second compared it to blackface for a minute, and was saying that it's no different than putting on a different person's race on your face if you're putting on a different genders, on your face. And that quickly, I really quickly flipped that one, because I was like, oh girl, that's not that's
not okay.
we can't be comparing those things. And so she's obviously like best friend, superhero now. She does everything for me. My dad at the time thought it was a sex thing. He was like, are you 15 years old and taking your clothes off on stage? Are you like being an escort? Is this? So I think that being able to just be like, no, it's just drag, this is what it is, kind of cleared up all ends of the spectrum. And honestly, it almost felt, in a sense, whether it's good or bad, that the gender issue was almost swept under the rug because of drag.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? But yeah, I think all throughout this time, sorry, John, all throughout this time, that though mental health has always been a part of the discussion. It's always been, are you okay? How are you feeling? I've seen a family therapist since I was 13 years old, and ultimately stopped seeing a therapist for a long time. And then I moved to LA all alone by myself, and needed a therapist again. So I've been seeing a therapist since living here. It's the most important thing you can do for yourself and for those around you, I think, is talking to someone who doesn't necessarily know you or have a hand in your life. You could talk to a loved one, you could talk to your mom, your friends, but ultimately they have a bias.
I'm really glad you brought up the gender binary that we all kind of have lived with, and it's really challenging to grow up and kind of not identifying with that gender binary when the rest of the world, a lot of the world really does. And you talked about having a language, like people often don't have a language to talk about this, but we're coming more and more into a place where we have language. We have people can talk about themselves in terms of being fluid or non-conforming, but it's hard like you said, in many settings. We're kind of constantly working on trying to help people to make this a more normal part of life, right? Inclusivity of people who don't identify. But it really is, like you talked about how the change from gender identity disorder to an improvement was calling it gender dysphoria, describing the depression really that comes along with a person who doesn't identify with the biological gender they were necessarily born with. and what a huge impact that is on people. A lot of people are suffering from that, that challenge in our community. So thank you for sharing and talking about that. That's an important part of, I think, our discussion these days.
Yeah, well, I've been receiving, since I posted about this event, the first time I posted about it, I've been receiving so many DMs from so many fans who are just saying like, thank you so much for talking about this. This is such an important topic, and no one talks about it enough. And it really made me like step back and like kind of reflect on, this isn't really ever talked about that much. Or I guess if it's talked about, it's talked about, but it's never really normalized, And I think there's so many vast ends of the mental health spectrum that people are afraid of, because once you start talking about it, or once you go to see a therapist, that immediately means there's something wrong with you, right?
Yeah, and I did wonder how, like, if at the time being taken to a therapist at 4, like how that, in hindsight, how do you think that may have affected you or informed things for you, or did you have an awareness of why you were being brought there, or?
No, I mean, do you have any memories from when you were 4 years old?
It's a good point.
I really don't. I know some people do. It's rare, but I swear my memories start at like 10 years old. But but yeah, I mean, being a 4-year-old, and I just think, no, I don't imagine that played any role in psychological anything for me. I was just tapping around in my little ruby red slippers and having a good old time and waiting in the waiting room when my parents talked to doctor whatever.
Yeah. Do you feel that issues with like anxiety or depression, or some of those deeper mental health struggles have come about in your journey directly related to coming out, or you mentioned being outed, for example?
Yeah. Yes. Short answer, yes. Long answer, more yes. I think that there's a version of just convincing yourself that there's nothing wrong with you, just to kind of reassure yourself that everything's okay. And I guess kind of it's another version of brushing it under the rug. And I think for so long I had done that, especially little mini story time. I was outed to my dad when I was 12, 13, something like that, because I got my phone taken away for doing, I don't know what, but one of my friends found out that my phone was taken away and thought it'd be funny to text it and say, your son Sam is gay, which, looking back at, I was like, damn, that's a really shitty thing to do.
Yeah.
But that led to some very dark conversations that I really remember very clearly, word for word, that I don't necessarily care to repeat right now. But I think that those conversations really took a toll on my self-worth. It took a toll on my thoughts for my future, because I was just convinced by my dad I wasn't going to have one. And as a 12-year-old kid, you believe it, and the thing that made it really difficult is that my dad actually has a gay brother, and so of course I was like, everything this person is saying is true because he knows a gay person, and this is what happens when you're gay. And so that really took a toll, and it to be honest, it wasn't until high school, like later on in high school, that I actually felt like I needed to talk to someone, So
yeah. Gigi, do you remember when you started to realize your own, like, that internalized homophobia or transphobia that you heard, and you internalized some of it, and then you grow to a point and you're doing therapy and you start to say, wait a minute, that's not an accurate belief, right, about myself.
Yeah.
It's not accurate to think that trans people or you know, people with in the LGBTQ community can't get a good job or can't function
Yeah.
in society or won't have a future, right?
Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. I know a lot of people who have definitely had to go through that with their upbringings. Again, I've always been a very stubborn person. So there was never any like internalized homophobia or transphobia or anything in me, just because I knew I was exactly who I was supposed to be. But now there's all these obstacles that are about to come in my future. You know, it was very much that feeling. But I do know a lot of people who did end up stepping back and like reverting and feeling a little bit like, well, maybe if I try not to be, then I won't.
Mhm.
You know,
Right.
that's never been an issue for me.
I think that really speaks to an important point, which is that, you know, I mean, we're here to talk about mental health and how it pertains to LGBTQI plus community, but everyone's an individual within that community with their own individual experience. And I know, John, you've brought up in some of our discussions this month with Pride Month, just that, you know, there's just, because we all have different families and come from different backgrounds, there's that individual story still for each person. So we can talk about some of the common threads regarding mental health issues in the LGBTQ plus community. And at the same time, there's, you know, you can't be representative of the entire group of people.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think, and a lot of people, I think what comes up for me is a lot of people who come to therapy who are struggling with their, you know, either gender identity or sexual orientation. They really struggle a lot of times with a lot of self-hate, and it seems like you were never in that place. But we see that a lot, right? And there's probably people watching this today that have struggled with self-hate from or anger with themselves internally from the things they heard and things they grew up with. And it just, you know, sometimes we take that stuff in and we tuck it away in a deep, dark place, right? But it's back there. And,
of course.
And we, a lot of people go to therapy, and part of their challenge is to address that within themselves and become, you know, actually learn to change their own internal beliefs around this kind of stuff. And it's difficult. Thank you.
Were there any, can you think of any instances along the way where, you know, there's a person you considered supportive, but may have had kind of a misstep or made a mistake unknowingly, you know, that, and that you could also provide potentially some advice for family members or allies of the LGBTQ community?
Yeah, totally. So like I said, I have two older brothers, both of which we used to fight just tooth and nail. We'd wrestle and chase each other around the block, and just like, I really terrorized these boys growing up, just because I was that kind of kid. But
As the youngest.
yes, as the youngest, that's just how it is. I don't know what to tell you, but at the root of everything, they've always been there for me. They've always had love for me. They have always stuck up for me. But you know, there comes a time, or there came a time for one of my brothers where, you know, we're only a year apart, so we went to school together, and he was very into sports and was very into boy things, had a lot of male friends who were athletes and you know, popular boys and all this stuff. And I kind of think that had its hand in how he thought of me. And I think in high school was really when he started just like, I don't know, he would never like call me a faggot. He would never do anything like that, but he would just be like, do you have to like wear heels, or like, do you have to wear this dress? Like, why are you doing that? You know, like everyone's talking about it and this blah, 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 like this very, very his tone of voice all the time. And it did really upset me for a while because I thought this person who was always on my side is no longer on my side or there for me. But to those family members who may be listening out there, or to those who might want to relay the message, all that it is a lack of information. And I guess lack of resource for that information. Because I had been hiding all of this stuff from my parents and my brothers, none of them really had any answers about what it was exactly I was doing. So I don't exactly know my brother's assumptions, but I'm assuming it was something along the lines of the same thing that my mom and my dad both thought when they first found out. And so, I mean, cut to right now, which I want to get out of the way, he is my #1 fan. He's got all my merch. He's constantly posting me. He's got, I mean, he's like, I love him to death. But there are those moments where people who love you and who care about you and want to be on your side are just misinformed and aren't exactly aware of what's going on. So in a sense, you know, you don't necessarily owe anyone an explanation ever. I'm very, very, very key on, you do not owe anyone an explanation. But if there's somebody who just really needs that in order for their relationship with you to stay strong, or I guess to even be stronger, then sometimes you owe it to yourself to give that person an explanation, so you don't have to, I guess, carry the weight of being this outlier in their life, you know? And so finally, when he really started to understand exactly what it was, he just like fell in love with it, and has really been a fan of it. It's helped him pick up girls. It's I mean, really, it's mutually beneficial here. But I think that I haven't really, I would say, I could obviously go into my dad. My dad has, you know, obviously said some very toxic things to me. He's made an insane come around. But I think a good example of the question you asked would probably be my brother. Yeah.
Mhm. It sounds like, well, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but that kind of extra step you took in saying, okay, I'm going to try to inform my brother, or, you know, inform the support system. Also, did it help you maybe not internalize or take on so much what was being said to you, and be able to kind of put that back on the person?
Yeah, of course. I mean, after I think that some of the reasons you internalize those things is because you start to believe that they are wrong, you know? And so I guess the more and more people that I explained it to and their reaction was, oh, okay. You know, that's when I was like, oh, okay. Like, you know, if the only opinions you have are from a very small group of people that you have not explained yourself to, it's easy to internalize those things. So I think it was those explanations. And again, with my dad, it took me being on national television and having a fandom, which is something still to this day that is very hard to wrap my head around. It's very like, I'm still very shocked every single day that I have a fandom. Like, that's crazy to me. And it took him realizing that I have any sort of influence on people's lives, and have you know, a good influence for that matter. And it's, you know, I just got a picture sent to me the other day by my mom of my mom and him at our hometown pride parade. He was wearing a Gigi Goode t-shirt, which is something that I never ever in a million years thought I would see. And so sometimes with these family members, it just takes time.
Yeah, it's really a beautiful image, actually, that you're, you know, literal image that you got.
Yeah.
I hope your own family experience is representative of the changes we're seeing at large as well, in terms of things shifting in the positive for the LGBTQ community. Do you have, or do either of you have, does any advice come to mind for maybe youth in particular that doesn't have family around them that they can feel supported by or talk to, but might be struggling with mental health issues or just their own, you know, kind of internal struggles with who they want to be?
Totally. I'll go first. I know Divas, there's a lot of Avalon TV girls in here, which for John and Kate, Avalon TV is like this kind of thing my friends and I have built up, and we have our own little fandom. And so there's a lot of people from there watching. And I think that a lot of them kind of share that same issue where they might not have the same support system at home, but they have all, through this whole thing that we've done, I think they found each other and they found friends in one another. And ultimately, we live in a time now where, you know, if you had asked me that question 10 plus years ago, first of all, I probably would have not been in the right state of mind to answer that to begin with. But we didn't have social media to the extent that we have now, which social media is such a double-ended sword. In that it can be very toxic and it can be very harmful in a lot of cases, and not just for the fandom. It's harmful for the people who have spotlights. It's harmful for everyone. But on the other hand, it's a chance for you to meet someone who does not live near you, who shares possibly the exact same values as you, and may come from a very similar place as you, in that they don't have the support system. So there are people building these chosen families online and eventually meeting in person. And I think that using people online and being able to share your stories online so that other people can see that and maybe reach out to you is a very valid resource in having that support system that you don't necessarily have built in.
Yeah, I mean, that's perhaps the best support system that young people have now, is to reach out through the chat rooms and through internet to connect with people like themselves. I think some other good resources, you know, for instance, in Denver, I'm more familiar with the resources in Denver, are the center in Denver for LGBTQ. They have a community they call Rainbow Alley to support queer, transgender, you know, non-conforming youth. That it's a place to go and talk about themselves and what's going on. And you know, you don't have to have any special permission to go there. You just need to be need to be interested in being part of that community. And you know, Denver Element, and there's others. There's several transgender organizations in Denver too that are there to help people. And I think, like you said, Gigi, the hardest part, is really reaching out and actually asking for support and asking for help.
It's hard.
We often suffer. Yeah, we often suffer in silence, right, by ourselves. But knowing that it's out there and it's available, and reaching out for it, I think it's helpful to have people like you say, look, you can, and it's here for you. And look, here's a, you know, did you call it Axios or Avalon?
Oh, Avalon. Yes, my friends.
Avalon.
Yes, my friends are at the House of Avalon. They live right across the street, and we've created this little streaming platform called Avalon TV, and that's where we've built a little fandom. But so I mean, beautiful. Another thing to realize and to really be thankful for, if you are on this call and you are a part of our community, you know, cisgender heterosexual people don't have the same type of community that we have. And so we have such a tight community of people that it's just so full of love. I mean, trust me, there's hate in all communities, but we are so lucky to be queer people. And I know I've said that before, and some people did not like when I said that, because obviously being queer comes with a lot of bad things as well, usually from the opposite side. But we are so lucky to have the minds and the hearts that we were given. And it's really our responsibility to connect with the other like-minded hearts and minds, you know, in order to find that, you know, safe space.
Thank you.
I think about what did.
Yeah.
Oh, I was thinking about just RuPaul's Drag Race itself. Like, what, I mean,
Bringing families together since 2000.
Yeah. Yeah, people started tuning in and connecting and recognizing what drag was, and seeing support out there by major celebrities. And it's crazy. It's an amazing, it really, drag in general has reached out and been a huge support. Amazing.
It speaks, I think, as RuPaul's Drag Race, I guess, has been around much longer than some of even the other things that have just come out in the last 5 years, but being so much more prevalent in the media and TV shows, and having more and more representation, so that people within the community sitting at home can at least say, like, look, there's people out there that are successful, that look like me, that feel like me, that have my, you know.
I mean, we've hit mainstream, which is...
I binge watched Pose, by the way, like, just...
Some things that's also very important to recognize as a queer person is you can say whatever you want about her, but RuPaul has literally created and opened this world for us. She's one of the few people who has, and she's done it in such a big way that she, like, just because of RuPaul's Drag Race, there are so many other forms of movies and TV and acceptance and understanding, and for these stories of these queer people to reach middle America, to reach some middle America family sitting in a living room who may be flipping through the channel and saw something sparkly on stage. All it takes is access to that. All it takes is seeing that to further understand exactly what these people are going through. And honestly, the root of mental health is, it's obviously internalized, but a lot of it comes from outside forces. And once those outside forces are informed and can actually understand that these people are human beings, I think that can play a big role in finally, I guess, normalizing and I guess neutralizing the stigma around mental health.
Is there any advice that comes to mind for you, just based on either like your own negative or positive experiences seeking mental health treatment, finding a therapist, engaging in therapy yourself, or with the medical community as a whole?
I am very, very lucky to live in Los Angeles, where I go to a doctor's office that every single doctor in the office is gay. I see a gay therapist, which is I'm very, very lucky to have that. I completely understand that those resources are not as easily accessible other places. It really, like, every time I go to the doctor or have a therapist appointment, it feels like a movie. Like, it doesn't, it's made it feel so, like I said before, a lot of people, when they start going into therapy, automatically are nervous to say anything about it, because once you start going to therapy, that means there's something wrong with you. But I have realized through speaking to therapists and speaking to doctors who completely understand who I am and where I'm coming from, that there's not anything wrong with me, and that it's completely normal. And I encourage everyone even if you think that you are completely of sound mind, I promise you're not. So talk to someone, and talk to someone with a like-minded point of view. But I'm very lucky and blessed to have not necessarily experienced those things, I guess, later in life, in my conscious adult self. But like I said, there were those moments in when I was 4 years old where it's like, how can you just diagnose a 4-year-old with something like this when they can hardly even, talk? So I think any of those moments that may have happened to me, I don't necessarily remember, but I do have a lot of friends who have had to go through a wild amount of transphobia and homophobia. I think a really good example of that that we talked about a little bit last time we spoke was the misgendering that happens, that whether it's an accident or not, it really can jump deep into the psyche and really mess you up if you don't identify with the gender that someone is putting on you. And a lot of times that happens in the waiting room. Sometimes it's hard to change your legal name. Sometimes it's hard to have the name that you want to be called, the gender you want to be called on your medical information. So if someone comes out into the room and says, John Doe, is he here? And, that can really mess with you. So I think that that's a big problem I bring it back to lack of information and knowledge. And I think a lot of places are getting way better at that. But we still have a long way to go. And I just think there needs to be in medical school, in, I don't know, therapy school. Where do therapists go to school?
Yeah, graduate school.
Graduate school. Yeah, they go to school. They go to school.
Yeah.
Of course. But there needs to be a crash course on acceptance outside, or not even acceptance. Well, yes, acceptance, but knowledge, just information, a basic history about who these people are, why they identify the way that they do, and why it's important for you to be as either ambiguous as possible, or I also have more resources for someone to maybe not have to put all their legal information, someone who might just like, if do you really need this person's birth name and gender is kind of what I'm asking. And I know, Kate, that you grew up in a family where it was very, very much a non-issue. You were very aware of everything, and you use that language now with your kids, which is amazing. And I think that ultimately you are a perfect example of what people in the medical field need to be responsible for. And it's also, isn't it fun just knowing about all this stuff? Like, we're such fun people. Don't you just want to know about us?
Thank you so much. That's really meaningful to hear you say that. Thank you. John,
Yeah, I know Kate and I have both experienced being within the medical or therapy field, the lack of education. This is
right.
The group of people supposed to be the most educated people in the world, really, right? But often in this area,
oftentimes the least.
and in positions of power too. And so then it's just yeah,
it's true.
Go ahead, John.
And there can be a lot of fear going into seeing a therapist for the first time, or a doctor. If you're not in LA or right, and in most of America, there can be a lot of fear. What do they think? What's their own opinion about me? What am I willing to share about myself? You're supposed to go into a therapist and be able to share everything about yourself very openly, right? And yet, if you think that the person might have an opinion about you, about your gender or how you identify, then you're not likely to engage with them that way. I think recently going into doctors and talking about PrEP, pre-exposure prophylaxis, and a lot of doctors just becoming informed about this, but a lot still don't understand, and they ask a lot of questions about, and they should be, like Kate has
which
said,
they should know.
They should be the experts.
Yes.
Right?
You shouldn't have to explain to them why you need this medicine.
Right. And that's, we've made progress, and there's still a long ways to go.
Yeah.
Of course.
Well, for the transgender community, I can put in a plug for WPATH and put in a plug for the medical community as well. So the organization I become a member of, the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, their goal is really to try to train up as many medical and mental health professionals as possible. So if you are a person who's looking for a professional, you can actually go on their website and search in your city and see if there's anyone who is at least a member who has completed some certification course. And then, walking into their office, at least they have some semblance of, acceptance, first of all, and then some knowledge behind it too.
Awareness.
Awareness. But I'd also encourage medical professionals, therapists, anyone in the mental health, behavioral health field to check out that organization as well, and consider getting some training. So
yeah, some signage sometimes is helpful within your office, right?
Yeah.
Or within the waiting room that just any sort of signage that's like friendly and welcoming, like a rainbow flag, or
totally.
a poster. Anything can let people know, oh, hey, this clinic, right, this therapist, they get it. They understand, and they're willing to hear me,
judgment-free. Exactly. It's weird that this is still like feels so new, It's weird that this still feels like something that has to be talked about. But I guess, like, I don't know, what kind of pop quiz do you give a doctor to make sure that they are on our side? Like, right, it's really just something that takes time.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like I could sit here and talk to you all day.
Yes.
But I think we were going to also let some other folks ask questions that have joined us live. So we were just going to have those kind of come through.
Sure.
The chat, and let's see. So I think, and you're seeing these too, Gigi, right?
Oh, am I?
Let's see. Oh, I got you. So
throw them at me.
One question is, did you feel represented by anyone on media when it comes to your gender as a child? How do you feel being the representation many other gender fluid people needed? That's a big question.
It is a big question, and I have a big answer. So the first time that I ever felt that I saw myself in media was from this movie. It was I think it's a Dutch movie or French movie or something. It's old. It's called Ma Vie en Rose. And I don't know if you've heard of it.
I love old movies, so yeah.
It's this gorgeous story about this this little boy who has this fantasy world where he gets to play and live with his Barbie doll, and he gets to wear whatever he wants, and eventually this fantasy world spills over into the real world, and he starts to wear these things, and people don't understand, and it becomes this big thing. But this movie is, I don't even know what year this was made, but it was actually recommended to my parents by my dad's gay brother when I was born, just coincidentally. And I think that's the first time when I saw that movie again, and then saw it again as an adult, I was like, oh wow, this is like very much me. This is what I had to go through. I think in regards to the word gender fluid, non-binary, I really had that realization when I was on TV, like filming the show was when I was like, cameras were rolling, and I was like, oh my gosh, is this like, I think this is what I am. I guess if I have to put a label on it, I guess this is how I identify.
People were asking you, or?
Yeah, I think, well, so a big thing that did kind of stick with me is that when we're being asked these questions in confessionals or something, it's important for us to know that the viewers of the show are not just queer people who know everything about queer culture. So some of these people who are watching are people who are brand new to this, middle America, don't know anything about it, and might not necessarily be passing judgment, but might also need those training wheels you know, to get them over onto our side and to help them understand. And in order to do that, that's usually when labels come in for them to better understand it, which if I have to choose a label for myself, I would say non-binary, gender fluid, everything, also nothing. So yeah, I would say that's, you know, I was told after I was on TV that I was the first thing people saw themselves represented in on TV, which is a really, that's a trip for sure, because never in my life did I think that I was going to be that person for somebody else.
Yeah, I think for the people that don't know or don't realize too, there's drag,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a large majority of people who do drag are cisgender males. And
Yes,
it's like, drag is different.
exactly. And I don't know if you saw season 13, the season after mine, but there's a queen named Got Mick on there who is a trans man, female to male, who does female drag.
Drag.
So, and that was so important for the show to have, and to have her make it all the way through and make it to the end and show like this person is still just a talented drag queen regardless of who they are and how they identify, but to show that to middle America and have them understand a little bit better the intricacies of gender was just very important.
Mm-hmm. Well, John, we have a question for us. So, as someone in a graduate program, for psychology who wants to work specifically with LGBTQ plus clients, what are changes that you want to see in the profession?
Oh, good question. You know, I think Gigi hit on it well. We need more education for one thing. I have a fair amount of graduate education, and I think I had like one class where we talked about gender identity, terms, language, sexual orientation. And so as big of a part of it is, I mean, it's a huge part of everyone's life. It's not just people who identify as a minority sexual orientation or gender, but everybody deals with their own gender and sexual orientation issues, right? And
that is so true.
Think about the number of people. A lot of people go to therapists to talk about this in their relationships, right? We need more education on it, and we need more tools. Some of that's being developed, and we've seen some good stuff. But yeah, I would like to see the shift go that way. I do love when I went to graduate school for counseling, when I was informed that social justice was actually a part of my job, right? Like, that's
so cool.
That's a neat part of being able to work in this field, and to take that seriously, that we hold that as one of our values, and I think many do, and some still struggle. Like you said, you might be in LA where there's a lot of support, but there's a lot of people in rural communities and other places in the world that don't have that kind of support or education, even as educated graduate level people.
Can I ask, do you both use, like, are you, sorry, let me phrase, do you ever do virtual therapy sessions for patients or clients?
This last year has changed everything.
Well, that's a really important thing to understand too, is that if you are living right now in these times, you more likely than not have a phone with a camera. And that means that you don't necessarily have to settle for your local therapist in your small town in Missouri. There are lots of resources where you have the opportunity to talk to someone who has also experienced what you may have experienced, or better understand what you may have experienced. And so to people who need therapy, who feel that they're afraid to go to their small town therapist because of who they are, and to this person who's asking about becoming a resource for these people who need it, you can you have the opportunity to treat people from all over the world if you want to. And it sounds like the step down from meeting in person, but honestly, it's a blessing to be able to talk to someone face to face through a screen. So.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely one positive that's come out of this whole year. And it's sort of in flux right now, but I think as a result, there's some initiatives happening, creating compact states in regards to licensing, because there was previously a lot of rules around license, like you hold a license within this one state, and the person you're seeing has to be in the state, but they relaxed all of those rules around the pandemic. And now I think we're going to see things changing where you have these compact state initiatives where states are partnering up with each other saying, all right, we recognize your licenses, you recognize ours. And so it's just going to open things up even more. And I think it'll help. So APN, actually, we're developing and have our own telehealth programming already. And I think those initiatives are going to give us even more flexibility in terms of seeing people nationally, hopefully in the future. So just increasing amazing. That access is great. Yeah.
That is great.
Yeah, I think there's some people who have started doing telehealth therapy and they'll never go back into an office again, right? There's actually a huge benefit of being comfortable in your own home and being able to talk with a therapist. So
that's big.
It's for that group of people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Gigi, one question we have is what advice do you have for young LGBTQ people that fear coming out or correcting others on their pronouns or identity?
Well, you should never feel, well, I shouldn't say you should never, because there's, everyone is living a different life, and you may be in a situation where it is scary, and you may actually be in danger from those things. But I think having one person at the very least who can understand you and who can side with you can make the worlds of a difference. Number one, and number two, I know this might be very hard to hear, but if you come out to your family or you correct your family on pronouns about you and they are harmful to you in any way, shape or form, mentally, physically, emotionally, they are not your family. That's not to say that changes can't be made over time, but you have the opportunity to create a chosen, as a queer person, we have the blessing and the privilege of being able to build our own chosen families. I know so many people whose families just left them on the side of the road, for lack of a better phrase, but have found that real family connection in other people that may have had the same thing happen to them. So I would say, if you're nervous about coming out to your family, that is completely understandable. And you really just need to do that at your own pace. You also have to understand that there's no rush unless you have this type of family who's pushing you to get a girlfriend or a boyfriend or someone who's not someone you're interested in. If this family is telling you to dress some type of way, I think those conversations need to be had. And I think that there's also, there's been a lot of what's so weird is that I'm kind of veering off a little bit, but my dad, after this picture was sent to me of him wearing my merch at the Pride Parade, I messaged him and I told him how much it meant to me and how it really was may seem like a small thing to him, but it was a really big thing to me. And he sent me this TikTok, which is so lame, but he sent me this. He's been loving scrolling through TikTok, and he has stumbled upon motivational speaker TikTok. And he sent me this TikTok of this guy who said something along the lines of, as soon as someone you love stops talking to you, that's when you're finally going to listen. And so, because my dad had just like driven me into, like, I didn't even have his phone number, you know. This man was, for all practical purposes, just a stranger to me because of the things that he had said and because he had no interest in my life. But because of me not talking to him and not involving him in this life that I'm living that is so crazy that I would love for my whole family to be a part of, it turned up the volume, and I think he finally listened because I wasn't speaking to him. And so sometimes if your family is clearly not on your side and you haven't come out to them yet, sometimes it just takes for some silence for them to finally listen and say, this, something's wrong with so and so, you know, maybe we should talk to them.
Wow. And you made a great point about your chosen family, the queer community, the gay LGBTQ community. There is a lot of support, but some people don't know how to find it and have to, you know, look through some of those resources, I think, to get there. Certainly, like, before, safety is very important here,
of course,
and having somebody to talk through the safety issues first, especially for trans people. You know, the violence against trans people is incredible, and so we do need to be very cautious of that. But also, having support helps you to kind of feel like you're in it with somebody, right? And when you're in it with your family of other queer people, then you could feel more confident in coming out and talking about your gender identity or your labels, or whatever you would like to be known as, you know.
Of course. And once you've created this family for yourself, that's not to say that your real family has been completely ruled out of the situation, because you can find this family and start living your life. And I promise you, someone from your past is going to resurface and come around and apologize and say, you know, okay, I wish I had been there for you. I see you, how happy you are, and I'm sorry. You know, that is very likely that will happen.
So one question we have for Gigi: how do you deal with those days when you're just not feeling great mentally?
Ooh, that's been a lot of days like that recently. I have been definitely noticing a shift in myself, and my friends have also been noticing that same shift, and it's been hard to navigate this shift and kind of understand exactly what it is. I, you know, full transparency, have not seen a therapist for a few weeks now. It's been probably about a month that I haven't seen a therapist, and I will be honest, it has made a big impact on my psyche, on my mental health, my anxiety. I've been very manic lately, and I think that, you know, something that really, okay, here's my answer. Something that really helped me understand what it is to have anxiety, to have depression, to have bipolar disorder, you know, is that these things, and it took for a medical professional to tell me this for me to understand, all of these things that you think are wrong with you are literally, on pen and paper, a chemical imbalance in your brain. That's what it is. You're not crazy. You're not, you know, unsavable. You're not just a misfit toy. You are just going through this chemical imbalance in your brain that needs to be corrected through counseling, through sometimes medication. And for me, just knowing that it was just a chemical imbalance in my brain, kind of helped me, at least in the time being, separate myself from the situation so that I could get the work done that I had been putting off because I had been slugging around, acting lazy and depressed, so that I could tend to my friends and be present and be a part of the conversation and still know, you know, this is what's going on, but it's not the end of the world, and it's not something to be ashamed of. It's not something that I shouldn't be talking about. It's not something that I should just throw to the side. it's something I need to deal with, but it's not what defines me in the moment.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's good to have that kind of gut check moment too, that you have,
Yeah.
like, what's going on? Oh yeah, I haven't seen my therapist in a month.
Yeah.
Maybe I need to like get some regrounding, and and if life happens, we all go through those periods of time where, you're not exercising regularly and that's the thing that helps you, or you're not going to the therapist regularly, that's what helps you. And then having that moment like, hey, I can get back to that. And I'm sure we've all had that this past year.
Yeah. Oh yes. Oh
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. What advice do you have for someone struggling with their gender identity, for them, for their parents? And I think I'm curious, within this question, you have talked about how, like, you just seem to have always come with this sense of internal confidence about you and who you were. And I'm just wondering, I mean, is that just you and how you came out, or where does that come from, and how do you access that and draw that?
I mean, I have always been a little bit of an attention whore ever since I was a little kid. I've just loved the spotlight in any capacity. And I think when I started to realize the more and more I didn't care about my own gender expression, and the more that kind of fueled the flames of those around me, the more I loved it, because I was just even more in the spotlight, I guess. But not to say that this should not be the reason that you do any of these things, but it did help me realize that, like, people are noticing that I don't care. People are noticing, and they are a little bit bothered that I am not fitting what they expect me to be. I'm not fitting what anyone expects me to be. I think for me personally, this is a tough one to try and give advice on gender identity of any kind. It's hard because it's so personal. But the day that I realized that I don't really identify as either or anything, but also all of it, was like really the day that it was so representative of everything else around me just not holding that much weight. It almost felt like I mean, okay, well, if my entire being is just completely free up in the cosmos doing whatever it wants to do, then I guess, everything else in my life can be too. And it was also another thing that I this is actually the reason I dropped out of college and moved to LA and went on Drag Race and all this stuff. You hear it all the time in movies, from your elders, from whoever. You hear it all the time. And it took one time for me to hear it, and it really stuck. But that is that life really, truly is too short to be like very concerned and consumed with all of this fear and all of this shame attached to who you really are, and sometimes by the time you figure out exactly who you are, your whole life has passed you by, and so that realization, I was like, I don't know why I'm in school right now learning about something I don't want to be learning about. I'm going to drop out. I'm going to move to LA, where I've never visited before. Came to LA, got a job, decided to quit it because I just didn't like it, and then started doing drag out here. And but this like epiphany was so pivotal in my in my realization to just not care how I identify, and so some people need those pronouns, and some people identify with those pronouns, and that's 100% okay. I'm not here to tell you how to identify. I'm not here to tell you how to get to where you want to identify, but it is one of those things that is up to you. You're steering the car here.
Yeah. And try to tap it. It sounds like, I know you've had a lot of support along the way, but at some point you really just kind of went with your gut, so to speak, but
Yes.
like you were listening to yourself.
it's all instinct. And it's crazy because people are like, well, I don't have any instincts, but you do. Everyone has instincts. And sometimes you just need to trust your instincts, because more likely than not, they are on your side because they're coming from inside of you.
Someone has a more personal, I think, question. They said, I'm someone who has a close relationship with their parents, but parents ignore the whole queer part of my identity because of homophobia. How could I start to express myself and start conversations with them without making them uncomfortable?
Sometimes you have to get uncomfortable to get comfortable.
That's where I thought you might go.
Yeah, you just do. And the reason I'm saying this now to you, as opposed to my last chosen family topic, is because you mentioned that you do have a close relationship with your parents, which is big. And if that's something that means a lot to you, then you have to keep that close. And in order to do that, your parents need to see all the sides of the child that they love and that they raised and that they ultimately had a hand in, creating. And sometimes it takes, I don't know, like for me to imagine two parents having such a close relationship with their child, then their child expressing themselves, and then the parents retracting, that to me, that really like just blows my mind so much. Because how can you, A of all, be a parent, B of all, be on your child's side just because that there's this unspoken thing that's never going to be talked about. As long as it's unspoken, it's fine. No. This is the child that you have raised. This is a child that you love. This child is trying to express who they are to you and welcome you into that. They're not trying to defy you. They're not trying to get under your skin. They're not trying to make you squirm. They want you to be a part of what makes them who they are. And I would expect the same in return, So I think that if you think your parents love you, if you know your parents love you and you have this close relationship with them, sometimes you have to take that leap and be exactly who you are and show them exactly who you are, and don't expect rainbows and butterflies, but expect for there to be a conversation, and be prepared to give them information, and not in a way that seems like you're upset with them or that they don't know anything, or they don't understand. You have to talk to them in a way that they're going to understand. All it takes is for once they understand you, you never know, they could go to one of their friends who might be experiencing the same thing with one of their kids. It's a domino effect.
Yeah, this we actually talk about this a lot in treatment, is boundaries and some of the kind of unspoken rules in dysfunctional families. And one of the unspoken rules is don't feel or don't talk about your feelings, right? It might make someone uncomfortable. And sometimes we have to be okay with getting uncomfortable. I often say to people, well, they don't mind making you uncomfortable. Why are you so concerned with them being uncomfortable?
Yeah.
Right. Because maybe you haven't felt empowered enough to say my feelings are just as important, and so forth. And so, that's something often we work on in therapy and in family therapy. Is it's okay to talk about difficult and emotional things within families, and it's a process for families to come to a point to do that.
Right.
So thank you. If whoever brought that up, if you're probably hearing some of that in treatment or in therapy.
Yeah, I hope we were able to answer as many. I mean, we only got to a few, but
I know. I'm so grateful for people that are watching this live. And there were a lot of questions that we couldn't get to, but we appreciate everyone being here and the engagement. I think, Gigi, do you have any final words for us? Or?
Well, sure. Thank you all, first of all, so much for joining. I don't necessarily see myself as the most knowledgeable about this topic. I don't believe that I know everything there is to know about mental health, but I do know that, first of all, these two people are, and second of all, I'm happy that I could be on here to at least make the conversation a little bit more normal. And, you know, somebody who is up on stage looking polished from head to toe might not be feeling that same way inside, and that's completely okay. And it does not make them crazy. It does not make them manic. It doesn't make them less than, just a chemical imbalance.
I want to thank both of you for being here today. Yeah, and your time. I'm so grateful to have been a part of this conversation with you both. And Gigi, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure speaking with you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you both. Really, I mean, I think the three of us together really covered all the bases. So I really appreciate you both taking the time.
Thank you.
Thank
think
you,
we'll
Gigi.
have,
Yeah.
thank you. And so we'll have Lana come back in and close us out.
Thank you so much, everybody. Wow, what a powerful and honest discussion that we had today. It was so enlightening, and really, I think, shed light on such important issues. I want to say a big thank you to Gigi Goode for taking the time to join us today and share her story with us. Mental health really is at the core of our mission at APN, and we're proud to be one of the partners helping to raise awareness of the mental health issues and the impacts of those issues, particularly in the LGBTQ plus community. Our goal is to normalize talking about mental health, like we talked about today, and many of the panelists mentioned, the stigma is still out there. And we're really trying to shatter that stigma around this topic. I feel like, you know, we will grow as a society the more we're able to get honest about mental health and the impacts of mental health on all of us. We encourage those who need help, really, please speak up, seek treatment, and above all else, know that you're not alone. Many of us share in the struggles, and it's hard, and sometimes we keep silent for too long. Thank you so much for tuning in to Pride 2021 session of the APN speaker series with Gigi Goode. And I'm really honored to be here today, and thank you.